what you're currently working on? Is it Red Pajama Man and Fat Guy?
It is. It is. It's, yeah. I'm glad you brought them up. Yeah, they're my new characters. And thank you for promoting that for me. But so I had that skill set kind of reinvigorated anyway, and then not having ever sort of sat around over the last bunch of time and said to myself, geez, I wish I was writing Daredevil again. I wish I was writing Daredevil again. I wish I was. Why aren't I writing Daredevil again? Why aren't they calling me? It's never crossed my mind. It's like it was done, right? It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a good break, but it was done. Now to have this door open, right? I remember going back from that convention and I sent the text to my son and I said, man, I just had the strangest conversation. You're never going to believe what came up to me. And he said, there might be something. I have no idea if anything is going to come of this. But even then, it was just sort of like an intriguing proposition. So once we started to have the real conversations around it, it was, to my mind, just a very mature, practical conversation. I've been spending the last 25 years working in advertising, which if you want to take a place where they will take your idea and bend it into pretzels and then come out the other side, did I do it? Did I have anything to do with that to begin with? I'm not sure. This has been fine, right? There have been changes. There have been things they've said, maybe you do this instead of that, or what if you brought it over to this location instead of that location, or geez, we suddenly had a change with with a certain situation, so you've got to do a last minute edit or that kind of thing. But so far, knocking on wood, right? It's all been professional. All the notes have improved the story to my mind. And I'm sure there are people who have other experiences, and bad experiences and whatever. But for me, this has just been like great. They've been receptive to what I've said. They've improved it with their suggestions, and I've had to figure out, like I said, all those corners I wrote myself into 30 years ago to kind of come back now and say, oh, damn, look where you left this. Now you got to, I can't just do the easy fix and say, oh, it was all cleared up and he's Matt Murdock and I've got to address where I left it. But it's all actually the challenge of that, I'll be honest with you, I think made for a better story because it made me have to introduce things that I wouldn't have probably had to address if I had just been telling a straightforward story in its own right.
So, from this, man, is there part of you that would want to play with Matt Murdock in the current MCU after you get done with this run, or is there something else from Marvel or DC, for that matter, that you look at this point beyond your creator own that you're like, that'd be fun to play with? Make Batman a poor lawyer.
Yeah. I don't. Right now I'm having so much fun with this armor, and I feel like I'm kind of owning this armor with Nitho. It's almost like, well, geez, nobody else is playing with this armor. I want to play with the Daredevil. I want to play with the armored Daredevil some more, right? If there was, again, not getting ahead of myself or whatever. If there was another opportunity to do more of this, I think there's more to do in that untold story zone, and that's kind of cool. Because I think what they're doing in the current Daredevil world, up through at least currently, right? Chip Zdarsky's, finishing his run or has finished his run, and I've read a fair amount of that. I think that's terrific. I think that's phenomenal. I think it's great work. So it's kind of hard to sort of look at that and say, geez, what would I do different? What would I add to that right now? As far as other things that might be fun to play with, all my things are like fringe. I mean, back in the day, I did a weird character called Terror Incorporated, who was like a boogeyman assassin who could steal other people's body parts and then use the abilities of those body parts to carry out his sort of mercenary missions. He was he was very close to my heart. Wasn't a big seller, but that would be fun to play with again, since I don't think anything's really been done with him of note. So wouldn't sell probably, but it'd be fun to play with.
I mean, you can't ever say that. Sometimes reinvigorating a character that was from the past, if someone's able to do it right,
Sure.
I mean, they make huge
Absolutely.
successes of it. You can, I mean, there's like I can think of several recent where that's happened. Like, who the hell knew who Star Lord was or Peacemaker before?
Look over your shoulder. Look over your shoulder right now. Who's behind you?
Oh, Swamp
Right?
Thing.
I mean, think about what Swamp Thing was before Alan Moore and Steve Bissette and John Toddleben, did their magic on it. It was a book that was a fringe character, going nowhere, and handed over to a relatively unknown writer in the States, at least. And what do? They come at it from a totally different tact, right? So
But
yeah, you're absolutely right.
if you're gonna bring up this piece, I just gotta give a shout out to Mike Ruth, who you can actually watch him draw this live
Is that Mike
on the
Ruth?
show.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, yeah. Oh, awesome,
yeah.
awesome.
It was,
Okay, I couldn't see the signature, but like that's
oh,
awesome. That's great.
man, if you could make that out, Dan, I'd be really, really impressed. I'll be real honest, right? It says, yeah,
I'd
it's
have to
two
zoom in,
diamonds.
but
I have Ruth.
it's a really impressive piece. Yeah.
Man, Mike's one of those guys I put up right there with Nithro. They're phenomenal at what they do. I've had the pleasure of having Mike on a couple different times. One of the time he drew
Mm-hmm.
on an alien cover what an alien would look like if it came out of the Little Mermaid. And that was intriguing.
I'm
Eh?
sure. I'm
And
sure. I'm sure.
scary as all hell. Not
Mm-hmm.
something I'd ever want to see. But I'll tell you what, man, if you look at from when you exited out to when you're coming back in now, you're getting ready. You haven't dropped any of your creative own books, right? But you're planning on
No,
you're
no. Yeah,
planning
it's
on running a
probably
Kickstarter.
this fall. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, what's your thoughts in that, man? I mean, because when you originally left the comic book industry, all the things that are things now weren't things, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
when you look around at comparing it from when you left to now and all the
Mm-hmm.
changes from, I mean, back then, what that was 97, 98,
Yeah,
right?
97, 98 is when
Right,
things
right.
really started to slow down, and then I
So,
stopped doing stuff 99, 2000.
yeah, Image had started
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh
was
yeah.
just beginning, but it had not had the impact on the industry that it did end up having, to where, you know, there's lots of publishers. Like I think I was speaking to someone else. I can't even remember who I had this conversation with. It might have been a couple people, honestly, but I think if it wasn't for Image, you know, you probably don't have IDW or Boom or On to the degree that
Mm-hmm.
they are without Image doing what they did first.
Sure.
Um,
Yep.
and then going from that to now you have all these crowdfunding where people are just making their own comic with
Mm-hmm.
nothing under the banner. It's just whoever's making it. We've got quite a few people on here who run comics like that. I grabbed Wells, but it's over in my bag because he actually just sent me some, as well as he's running Mechatona, and they just had another book successfully crowdfunded. When you look at the difference in that, like, what do you think? And do you think it's an overall positive for the comic book industry as a whole, or do you think there's been something that's hurt the comic book industry as a whole with it becoming what it has compared to what it was?
I mean, from my perspective, and this is, an N of one, as they say. I mean, I think it's great. I mean, I think from a creative point of view, um, it's totally freeing in that you now have an opportunity to connect much more closely with an audience. You said this earlier on, to control your destiny kind of with what you're doing and how you're doing it. And the things that you can get printed up, how they look, how they're represented are just as good as anything from a full-on publisher. And so I think and it also, gets the idea out there that you don't need to have ultimately. I mean, yeah, great. Give me a 500,000, in sales. I'll take that. But what I really need is I need 5,000 dedicated fans who kind of come back every time for what I do. I need to cultivate that audience with what I've created maybe over time. So I think it's a great way to make all that happen. It does carry a different burden though, right? And the burden it carries, and this is why people I think default to saying, well, I really want. I mean, obviously you want to work for a Marvel or DC because you want to play with those toys. You want to get in that sandbox. But there's also that defaulting of, well, I want to get Image to pick my book up. I want to get Boom to pick my book up. I want to get so-and-so to pick my book up. Because there is that creator ethos or spirit of, I just want to do the work. I just want to do the work. I just want to do the good work. I want the work to speak for itself. All these other things, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever, crowdfunding, you've got to do a shit ton of work, right? You've got to put the book together. You've got to deal and figure out the costs and the printing, and it's not, automated and like one click does it all. And then you've got to market it. Nobody's going to put Kickstarter out there and like, boy, I did my Kickstarter. Where's the money? Right? You've got to have 30 days, 45 days, whatever it is, of carpet bombing the world, contacting everybody pulling in every favor. I mean, right now, I am, I've got 30 days worth of Instagram posts, banner posts, quotes, video clips, blah blah blah, that I'm trying to put together and line up so that when that thing starts, it is just one thing after another. People are going to be sick of me, but I don't know what anybody sees, right? Because the algorithms on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, just because we know each other, right? You and I are, follow each other on Twitter right now or something. I don't know if you're going to see it. That doesn't mean you're going to see it that day. That it could be pushed out of you follow me, I follow you. Doesn't mean shit. You have to be ruthless about it. And that's a lot of work. And that's work that's not, creatively engaging. I have to put it in a different part of my brain to do that.
I cannot tell you, Dan, how much I relate to what you just said. Because I love running the show.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Mm-hmm.
bringing on all kinds of great curators. You've all been a pleasure to have quests with. I really don't mind the editing. It's a creative part of my brain. I like doing it, putting everything together, putting all the thumbnails and this and that, blah, blah, together. But then when it comes to like, hey, this show's out, I'm really, really bad about that because this is the 70th quest that has happened.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, there's been 70, and that's just the questionnaire. That's not including this month in comics and the pan cons that we have hosted, which I think they're sixth, and the sixth one will be out by the time this is. So there's 6 pan cons currently as well. Man, maybe it's 7. I don't know. It's 6 or 7. It's the pan, but this is the 70th episode of the actual questionnaire show where I'm bringing on and discussing with people. But yeah, the marketing of it gives me a damn headache, man.
Yes.
Like, how?
I totally relate.
Yeah. So, what do you, just out of curiosity, when you haven't had to do that yet, though, have you? Yeah. You ain't brand
for
new
this?
well,
no. It's I'm lining it all up now. But I'll tell you what else I'm doing, from a marketing point of view, is from October 22nd, which is a month out from when Daredevil Black Armor comes out, which is November 22nd. I will have I'll have 120 posts I'm lining up right now about that book as well. So like every day between each issue, I'm going to have something like either a tease of the art or, a line from the dialogue or, some silly stuff just to keep that rhythm going. And that's not even my book, just because you have to market yourself. You can't let the work speak for itself. I would love that. I would dearly love that. I mean, I'll go back. I think I've said this before somewhere, but when Scott McDaniel and I did Fall from Grace, nobody wanted to pay attention to that. The editorial office believed in what we were doing, but we couldn't get press to cover that book. Scott and I paid for a publicist out of our own pocket to get some of the initial attention on that book, which I think was partly responsible for, like, oh, those guys are doing something, which helped. The work, I think, helped too, but I think that also helped get some additional attention. So even then you had to do it. Even more so you had to do it, maybe.
Like you said, man, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So I
It
think
is a great quote.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think as creatives, it's certainly something that we have to be able to get out of, because I know a lot of creative individuals, both from the comic book and the hip hop side of things, where they're like, look, I just want to make shit, and
Sure.
then someone else shove it out into the world for me, and so I can go back to making more shit. All right, I'm not.
And it's a totally understandable proposition, right? I'm not arguing with that. I would love to do that. I'm not faulting anybody for, wanting just to devote their time and energy to that. But it is also, unless you are definitely in the catbird seat, unrealistic.
Uh, yeah, you're right. But you know what's funny? I think really. Uh, what's your opinion of the Hollywood strike, real quick?
I want the best for those writers and actors. I think they're definitely on the right side of history and the right side of fate and the things they're trying to take a stand for, both from them as personal people, as professionals, the lives they're trying to lead, and the tone deafness of the multi millionaires, on the other side is striking, in this nonsense that they're kind of playing out. So
Uh,
I hope they're able to stick to their guns and effect some change, because if they don't, um, they're not going to get another chance right now in the world as it is.
well, do you ever look at it though? And I mean, I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like it's a systemic problem. It's just a lot of that is like, if the execs took the proper pay cuts to pay everyone else properly, as far as in
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood, and then that just happened, like, period, in the U.S., to where all the execs took the proper pay cuts to where they were paying their fucking employees properly and giving them health care and doing what you're supposed to as an employee. Maybe we should all just go throw fecal matter. Maybe we should all just go piss at Congress and be like, you say the shit comes downhill, right? Well, raise fucking minimum wage to a livable level in this country. And if you think about it, I think it would help the entertainment industry a great deal if you
Sure.
did that, because then suddenly everyone has more extra income that they'll be like, oh well, I can go buy that movie or see that movie or read that, buy
Mm-hmm.
that book and buy that comic to read it, or whatever the hell else it is. And I think it's more of a systemic problem than people understand in that. And
It, it's it's hugely that. Do you know the author Cory Doctorow? Do you know his work at all?
no.
Science fiction writer, but also technology, and futurist, nonfiction writer. And he just recently wrote a book called Choke Point Capitalism, which I would mangle badly if I tried to encapsulate all the thinking in there.
Who
But
told
one
me?
of the cent-
That's real funny, because I'd have to grab their questionnaire, but somebody literally just told me I should read that recently on the show, a different guest. So really definitely
there,
going to need to read Choke Point Capitalism now, because that's twice it's been brought up on the show. Mind you, he brought it
it,
up because I brought up Adjustment Day.
right. Well, from what you're saying, I think this is going to resonate with you. And one of the core tenet of the book is essentially, this idea, especially from a creative community point of view, that big companies create these choke points, right, where they are then leveraging all the creative energy and all the creative output, and then it's under the control of people who are creating nothing, right? And so they're sucking and they're leeching all of this out of these creative people. And what are they getting, at the end of it? You were top of the hour, at the top of when we started, you were laughing about Spotify, right? How you got to sell 12 billion, units or impressions or whatever it is to get like 12 cents out of it. Really? Honestly, is that how it works? Because and that's the way the system has been mangled so badly by people who can sit there and, Bob Iger who I used to have a little bit of respect from because I watched one of those master classes and said, "Oh, this guy seems pretty thoughtful." Not so much anymore. Sits there in his, $12,000, slacks and his, $8,000 shirt, on a hillside overlooking an island he owns or something, saying, well, these artists and writers and actors just don't understand the reality of the situation and the damage that they're doing to the industry by doing this. They have to come around to a hard dose of reality. You don't have any touch on reality right now. You're so far removed from it. But yeah, I think you should definitely read that book. It's very, very it's brutal in a good way.
I'm definitely gonna have to, because, like I said, it's literally the second time a guest has brought it up. So it apparently must resonate with me if I got guests that read, hey man, you really need to check this out. I'm like, well, shit. Apparently, I really, really do. I didn't know it was like, if a third guest brings it up and I ain't got it yet, I'm gonna be like, God damn, let me go order that real quick, man. I'll be right back.
Exactly.
Oh hell. Oh, and you're right as far as like the execs and how they're saying you're affecting this. Man, look, when you're making an AI intro to Secret Invasion, I don't want to hear about you affecting and what you're affecting, because that was the terrible intro. It's the worst intro I can ever think that I've seen, was the intro to Secret Invasion.
Well, and there's the thing, right? It's not necessarily that they use some kind of quote unquote AI technology, which is just machine learning, aggregated plagiarism, in its own way. It's just that it wasn't very good. But didn't that actually resonate totally with the whole program? I couldn't make it past the fourth episode. I can't even imagine I'm going to go back for 5 and 6 at this point. So, and I'm sorry if you loved it, but I'm assuming you didn't.
I personally, no. I think the only saving grace of that show were like, it was the Russian spy. I don't remember her name.
Oh yeah, she was good.
And Samuel L. Jackson, right?
Yeah.
Because I love Samuel L. Jackson as an actor. Like, he's one of those guys where I'm like, man, he can be in something bad, but his parts, I'm still like, yeah, that was good. At least his parts were good. But overall, especially being someone that was a huge fan of the original Secret Invasion storyline, especially based on the fact that, it was Wade Wilson who got to pop up out of nowhere, right to the Skull Queen, and then just get no credit for it. Out takes it all. I kind of wanted some moment like that. I swear, if there was a moment where they could have just randomly introduced Deadpool, just out of nowhere. I'm sorry, that was a great moment. Just like Nick Fury had no one else to call. Well, I'm gonna call this lunatic in the red mask and tell him he needs to come save the world. Suddenly, like, Gravik just gone from an adamantium bullet or some shit. You know what I mean? And then, I said this on This Month in Comics with Dave. What you do is you have Harrison Ford show up as Thunderbolt Ross and take credit for the whole thing. That's a phenomenal ending to that show that at least would have lived up to the comic book a little bit, because and it also would have set up a ton of things. You could have played that into Deadpool 3. You could play that into the Captain America movie that's coming out with Thunderbolt Ross. I mean, it links things together more, in my opinion, than they did. Marvel, if you want to hire me, just,
you know where to find you.
Like Kevin Feige, I'm right here. Hit me up on the questionnaire. We can chat ideas about the MCU all day, man. All you had to do was get Ryan Reynolds and Harrison Ford to show up for one day of shooting each.
That's it. Right.
And that sixth episode would have gotten viewed 1 billion times.
So true. I gotta make it through 5 and 6. So I got some catching up to do.
Well, in all honesty, Dan, as sad as it is, I don't even know that I would recommend it as far as using the time.
I feel there's so much good stuff to read. There's so much good stuff to watch. It really is hard if you're not pulled along by something. And this, goes again back to what I was saying, even just about trying to write this new series and just focusing on that. If you're not pulled along by something, to sort of take the extra effort and like say, oh, I got to finish it. I'm like, I'm like halfway invested. I guess I got to finish it. Now, you know what? You're better off bailing and moving on to something totally unknown. You're more likely to kind of get dragged into something and then, holy shit, I didn't even expect that, and have a
Like, check
better
out
time
the
for it.
Unknown Factor's music. Sorry, I had to. You said unknown.
There you go. The plug. Absolutely.
I
Go.
couldn't help myself, man. I don't plug my music much, but there is a link in the descriptions where you can find my music as well as the Patreon to the show. If you like it, you can go support as well as see everyone's pre-show questionnaires that I never get into all the questions that I make them answer. I promise you, it's a lot, as well as there's a bunch of links for Dan and all his stuff, and you'll be able to check everything out as far as to get to anything that he's done, if you've enjoyed this interview with Dan. But where do I want to take this, Dan? Where do I want to take this? I don't know, man. I'm trying to think because we went
So
several
many good
places,
places. So
and
many
there,
good places you can
and
go.
there really are, man. There really are. I do love. Can I say? And nobody like the questionnaire has changed over time. For anyone, if you go sign
Hmm.
up to the Patreon, you can tell that the questionnaire that Matt Hawkins got, who was the first guest over here, compared to like the questionnaire you got, there's a lot of differences as well as everything in
Hmm.
between. They've been modified and tweaked and this and that. Um, but when I added favorite curse word,
Hmm.
fuck, man, people really like that word.
I can imagine. I think it is easily the best word of them all. But I'm sure there might be others, but maybe in another language. I don't know, but I think it carries.
There's a couple people who answered in a different language and then had to translate it for me.
Hmm.
That's happened a time or two. But does it annoy you knowing that what you're writing now, you can never use that word, or at least not actually printed? You'll have to like have it in scribbles or some shit. Because that's
No, no, because again, like I don't. If you have to depend on that for effect, and that's all you got going for you, uh, uh, I don't know. I mean, there's one scene that would be nice if Matt said "fuck no." I even said that to Devin at one point. Not trying for it, like not saying, "Oh, can't we get away with that?" You know, it, you set this up earlier. You're working within certain parameters, which are not necessarily bad parameters to work within, right? It's not a kiddie story. They're not kiddie books. I don't feel like I'm telling the exact story that I want to tell right now, and getting to hit all the right notes and the right tension and the right, hopefully, 90s moments in a way. Um, and if I had to say, if I had to say, well, my story depends on me getting, having to say fuck or shit or something like that, man, talk about writing yourself into a poor corner. What else you got? Not much, I would think.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I will give you that, especially someone that writes music. I mean, that I got like early on when I was writing, I used that word prolifically, and then I was like, I need to lessen this and use more of my vocabulary in its
Yeah,
entirety. So
right.
so I
And I've got
understand that
nothing
perspective.
nothing against it, like I mean,
Well,
in the
look,
sense of
yeah, I do hip hop, man. You're gonna throw a fuck out occasionally.
totally, totally, and like, and like I'm not, there's that old canard, I think, about like, well, especially with comedians, right? Well, why do comedians need to swear and stuff? Why can't it all just be like, clean humor and stuff? Um, a smart, really good, sharp comedian will use the language to effect, right? They'll bring it out there and they will use it. A shitty comedian is going to go get up on stage and they're going to go, fuck, you know what I'm saying? And just for a shock factor and like, think that they're going to get like laughter, around that. They're not going to construct something around the way that they're going to deliver it or why it's going to come into the dialogue. Whereas a smart or brilliant one, will make the right use of it, very considered use of it when you break down how many times they probably rehearsed it. But in this instance, this is not the forum for it.
Yeah, yeah. If you're gonna bring in comedians like that, I would say my favorites that were known for having mouths, but damn, did they know how to use them? Were probably Murphy, Pryor, Chappelle, and Black,
Mm-hmm.
respectively. Like they all
Mm.
knew how to use those punches properly, but man, they used them a lot. You know. So are you giving yourself more leeway in your creator-owned book? I'm curious, like, what rating are you aiming for in that?
It's probably PG-13 to R if I ever want to go there. I mean, obviously I can do whatever I want, but so far I think there's some cuss words in there. I think there's a couple of shits and there might be a fuck or two. I really, but that has felt very conversational, right? Like the way that people are reacting to something. A character, the main character, I think her first reaction to seeing something truly horrific, truly otherworldly, is to say "holy fuck" or something like that. And it was the rhythm of it. This particular book, I'm working with a guy named Carl Waller, and it's an idea that he and I have been cooking for way too long. Actually, we originally came up with it like 20 years ago, and then we lost touch and so forth. But then we got back together and sort of said, hey, remember that idea? Let's make something of it now. But if we had written the book or created the book back then, it would have been a very different book. It would have been more, I would say, just by the numbers in some ways, and good by the numbers, but by the numbers in terms of action and so forth. Now it's kind of taken on this very natural rhythm. There's still a lot of action. There's still a lot of supernatural stuff. There's still a lot of weird, wicked stuff going on. But the reactions of the characters they've totally led me along. Like I really feel like I'm in the zone when I've been writing these things. And so when that character swears or uses certain words like that, it just feels like they're telling me what I need to do versus me. You know what? I want to say this because I like to use some nasty language or something like that, which is a great place to be.
What's your thoughts on that then, man? Like the fact of how much the industry has changed, not from a standpoint of, companies, but a standpoint of they used to be way more oriented towards teens and younger kids. And I mean, not all of them. I mean, around the 80s and 90s is where you really started getting that wave of change. But before that, certainly even more so. But even in the 80s and 90s, and I'd say early 2000s, there was a stigma about, these books are for kids. They're not for adults.
Yo, this is Mark McKenna here. Check me out at www.markmckennaart.com.
This is Alex Segura, author of Secret Identity.
My name is Anders Zarate.
This is Laverne Kinjerski.
This is John Ward, creator of Scratcher and a whole bunch of other crap.
It's Jason Copeland, artist and writer of Full Tilt.
You are listening to The QUESTionnaire.
Say that again.
You got to check out The QUESTionnaire.
He's been super fun and entertaining, honestly. It's like just like hanging out with friends and chilling. It's cool, man. I love it. It's nice.
You need to check out The QUESTionnaire. I mean, you do.
Whatever file format you want, or even a carrier pigeon.
New episodes every week.
Jeez, I better write that shit down.
I love y'all, and it's a hell of a quest.